You're watching PowerNation. Today on Carcass, we continue to build our Spec Panther race car. We head out to a nearby salvage yard in search of a locked rear end to get all that V8 power evenly to the track.
Then we'll upgrade our brakes to help us get into the corners harder. Plus, we'll show you a few tricks to get an aggressive stance for better handling on the course.
Hey guys, welcome to Carcass. Well, we are still working on the Spec Panther. We're out here at AM Salvage in Unionville, Tennessee, and we're looking for a specific rear axle.
And per the spec rules, we can't put any aftermarket parts on the car, but if you can find stock replacement parts, i.e. a stock axle with a locker in it, you can do that, and that's a good performance benefit for us. So we're gonna go find and pick one out.
Yeah, I think they're over here somewhere.
All right, let's do it.
Let's go for a walk.
Come on, kitty.
Come on, kitty. This is where he said all of the axles are for like Crown Vics and Grand Marquis, so.
All right, well, you can kind of look at tags.
Start digging.
See if they spin. This one, that's just open. That's not gonna do it.
We'll keep digging here.
Oh, this one says it's from a Crown Vic.
Oh, yeah, police too.
Yeah.
See if this one spins.
All right, that side's not spinning, so.
Yeah, this side's not spinning, so it must be open. We can check the tag on this one. No, that doesn't have an L on it.
I actually think this one is.
Down there?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's got an L between the gear ratio, so.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll just have him pick this one and check it out.
Dig it out, yeah. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. Down here on the axle tag, there's the axle ratio or the gear ratio, and there's an L in front of the 27, and that's what we're looking for. We assume the L stands for locker, which is what the internet says. So this is the axle we want. We'll go ahead and load this up. All right, what do you say? We're all loaded up. Get back to the shop and clean it up?
Yep, sounds good. Looks a bit strange that I have 2 cans.
It's for twice the cleaning power. Once we let the degreaser do its work, we'll hit it with the pressure washer.
Jeremy did a good job cleaning up the axle outside, and so the plan here is to get the axle out from under the Crown Vic. We got to steal some parts off that one to put on this one, but in the meantime, I'm going to be taking this one apart. We'll clean it even a little bit further, and then we'll give it a nice coat of paint. To get the axle cleaned up, we'll take everything we can off of it, starting with the sway bar. After that, we'll take out the control arms, the Watts link, and the calipers along with the rotors. Then we'll take the diff cover off and drain the fluid so we can service it later. And finally, we'll use our wire cup to get as much of the surface rust off as we can before we hit it with some paint. All right, get to painting.
Coming up, we get our old rear end out so we can add our true track setup. All right, guys, well, Jimmy has the Junkyard axle all stripped down and cleaned up, so now we have to get this one out from underneath the car. It's all pretty basic. Get rid of the drive shaft, the 4-link connections here, shocks and the brakes out of the way, and get this thing on a stand. After we get the drive shaft off, we'll start tackling the hard parts. Most of the stuff comes off pretty easy with the help of a breaker bar and some elbow grease. Like Jimmy said, we'll need to reuse some of these parts, so I'll be careful taking them off. When removing the rear axle, you only want to loosen the bolts for the lower and the upper control arm. That way the axle won't fall out of the car. But we will be removing the sway bar links before we set the axle down on its stand. Okay, so now that we have the weight of the axle on the stand here, I'll go ahead and take the bolts out, and then we'll just pick the car up, drag the axle out from underneath it. All right, guys, well, we got the axle out from underneath the car, and we got to switch some parts over, but let's go over how to figure out if you guys have a lock differential or not. Well, there's a couple quick and easy ways to do that. One is if you have the tag on the axle like we saw in the Junkyard, you can check that. Or specific to our Crown Vic, if you have the door sticker on the B-pillar, you can have a code for the axle. In our case, we had a Z code, which means we don't have a locked rear diff. But if you guys had a locked rear differential, you would have an X code. But what if you don't have any of that information? Quick and easy way you guys can test that is if you put one hand on the rotor or the axle shaft on this side, and you can spin the diff over yet, that means you don't have a locked diff, unlike that axle right there.
So on our new axle, this one is equipped with Ford's traction lock differential, so if we try to do that test, both axles would spin in the same direction. But if you're in a junkyard or something, the brakes might be seized up, and if you don't have access to tags, how else can you figure it out? Well, the easiest way is to just pop the cover off, and specific to the traction lock differential, they have this S-spring in here which preloads the clutch packs. And luckily we were able to verify ours with the tag, but there are multiple ways to do it.
We got a couple parts that we got to switch over to get this thing back underneath the car, and when we're done doing that, we're going to do one more quick little upgrade. The e-brake hardware on the Junkyard axle was in pretty bad shape, so we'll salvage the good parts from our stock axle. All right, now we'll just use that hardware. We're gonna just replace these e-brake shoes with just ones that we picked up from our local parts store. Adjuster in there. Then we got one more spring to do, and we'll move on.
Up next, we'll add extra stopping power to help us on the track. Hey guys, like Jeremy said, we have a few upgrades to throw on our rear axle before we get it back under the car, and these are allowed per the Spec Panther rules. And that all starts with the Hawk Performance Talon Rotors, which are high carbon steel with cross-drilled faces to help withstand the abuse that the pads and the fluid will be applying to them. To pair with that, we've got Hawk's DTC60 racing pad, which is Hawk's most popular racing pad. These provide up to 3 times the friction of a store-bought pad and can handle temperatures over 1600 degrees. This is a huge deal because when stock brake systems are pushed on a track setting, they tend to fade or can even fail completely. So these components are going to keep our car safe and consistent. And once we move back up to the front of the car, we will be using Hawk's HP660 brake fluid. Just like these components, brake fluid will soak in heat from the caliper, and in stock brake systems, if it loses viscosity, you can have, again, brake fade or the system will fail completely. So this stuff has the highest boiling point of Hawk's brake fluid line, so it's a must-have for track cars, but you can even use this stuff on the street. So we'll get this stuff on the axle, get it back under the car.
This should go pretty easy, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of moved underneath here and we'll be all right.
Yep, lower the car down.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, here we go.
All right, guys. Now, the spec rules clearly state that you can run any stock part from any other vehicle. So in the rear here, we're going to be running a set of springs from an 05 Mustang. Now, besides for the physical difference between the two, there's also a spring rate difference. The Mustang's got 135 pounds per inch spring rate, and the Vic's got 163. Now, that may or may not give us any gains on the performance side of things, but that is going to make the car sit a little bit lower. At least we hope it will, and that's always a good thing. So what we're going to do here is get the springs installed, and then we're going to wrap up the install of the rear axle. Go ahead, Jimmy. A little bit, a little more. Right about there. Then we gotta just kind of shift. Oh, it's so heavy. There's one. Ready?
Yeah.
There it goes. Cool. With our axle basically installed, we'll throw on our Hawk pads and finish up the brakes. All right, so the last thing we're gonna do here is install a set of shocks that we got from Summit Racing. These are KYB shocks, and this is an OE replacement for the car. And from here, we'll move up front, start on that suspension. All right, well, that basically buttons it up back here. I got a couple more things I got to take care of, like the drive shaft and the Watts link. But then we will go ahead, transition to the front, tackle that suspension too. With the rear done, we head up front to give our Spec Panther a sportier stance.
We've got the rear axle back under the car now, and we're moving up to the front. To get the drop we need up here, all we have to do is take the strut and spring out of here, take the spring off, cut the spring down just a little bit, and then we'll throw that on a new strut and get it back under here, and the front should match the back. With the wheel and tire off, I'll start by taking out the lower bolt of the strut. All right, I think that's pretty well seized in there, so we'll have to get some heat on it. All right, so sometimes bolts get stuck. You hammer on them, do whatever you can, but ultimately use some heat. Usually this helps, and sometimes even that doesn't work, so you either have to actually cut it with the torch or find another way to cut it and get it out. So we'll try this. Hopefully it works.
All right, Jimmy, you ready?
Yep.
Set, go.
Yeah, it's moving.
Nice. Nice.
With the lower bolt finally out, I'll go up top and take off the 3 nuts holding the strut in. To get the strut all the way out, I'll have to take the upper and lower ball joints out of the upright assembly. All right, let's get this spring off and we'll cut it down. Get the top of the strut off. After that, we'll take the spring off and get to cutting. All right. That works too. Getting a new one anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We're just gonna take out 1 coil to start, but we do think this will give us all the drop we need. If not, we can always go back and cut more later. We'll take our freshly cut spring and install our new KYB strut from Summit Racing. All right, get this back in. Just to be safe, we'll replace our stock lower strut bolt with a grade 8 bolt. All right, that wraps up the front, and just like in the back, we're gonna throw on some Hawk Performance rotors and pads, and then I'll go back up top and tighten the top of the strut.
And since we have the car up in the air, we figured it'd be a good time to tackle the exhaust system. Now, we plan on driving this car on the street, so we want to keep the catalytic converters underneath the car, and there's really no point in doing this big, elaborate exhaust system anyways, so we're going to keep it nice and simple. What we're going to do is just replace the muffler with these Summit branded mufflers. It'll give us a nice, good tone. We got a little piece of pipe here to help us tie this all together, so I got to get back underneath the car. We're just going to cut the old mufflers out, and then we'll weld all this stuff in. Okay, so that little relief cut loosened the front up. So now we'll just come back, cut the back out of this, get the muffler out of here. That. Same thing goes for the second side. Okay, so this is a universal fit muffler, and I ordered the longest one that they had, and you can see we end up a little bit short here, but I also ordered a piece of pipe, so we'll go ahead and take this measurement, somewhere around 8 inches, and we'll go cut that out on the chop saw. All right, let's do a quick test fit. Let's see how this works. Yeah, that should work just fine. From here, we'll just prep everything, fire up the welder, get this all welded in. With the welder set up, I'll tack the parts in at first, then fully weld up the new mufflers.
Look at that.
Yeah, what do you think?
Would you just look at that? That's
Get that
nice.
down on the ground. That squats a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's 2 or 3 good inches right there.
The back, God, the back's really down too.
Yeah.
I like it.
Dang.
Should handle a whole lot different when we're out on the track.
Yeah, lower center of gravity. That's
Right.
always a good thing.
Well, I think from here on out, I think we should do maybe a color change on the car.
Yeah,
It is a race car.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll get it off the hoist and get her down to the booth.
Yep.
If you like anything you've seen on the show today, check out PowerNation TV.